And good evening. Thank you so much for watching Life Ahead. I'm your host, Mark Evans. And of course, this program is a weekly program, and we discuss vital subjects and topics, and it's for any adult of any age. So we thank you for watching tonight. And a very important topic tonight, something that people don't like to talk about or think about, but it's very important that you at least know how to navigate around this particular situation if it does happen to you. And we're talking about when someone passes, what to know and do. And we do have a couple of great expert guests on hand. We have Janelle Sprinkle, who is an attorney. And Janelle, you've been on the program before, haven't you?
I have. First time with you, Mark.
Yes.
So I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for being here. And for the first time, and I'm honored to meet Rebecca, or Becky Mays, who is the Senior Investigator, Deputy Coroner of the Allen County Coroner's Office.
Yes, sir.
Great to have you here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for being here as well. And we're going to go ahead and just get started. But I want to, before we do that, I want to let our viewers know that we have ways for them to communicate with us. And there, of course, the telephone calls. You can make a call and you can stay with us and ask the question on the air live. Or we now have texting, which is a great attribute to the show. And when you text, and you'll see the two different numbers there for calls and texting, but when you text, please give us at least your first name and the town from where you're calling, because we'd love to do a nice shout out to you, because we appreciate your viewership and your support. So let's start with you, Becky. Let's just start at the very beginning. What happens when a death occurs in a home, and who needs to be notified?
Okay, usually when a death occurs at a home, there's either you'll have a hospice situation or you may not. You may just have your loved one who passes at home of natural causes, or you might have a traumatic event. The person that needs to be notified first is 911. You need to call 911 because unfortunately we do have some people who call funeral homes directly and say, hey, my husband has died. Mm-hmm. Can you please come pick up my husband? Unfortunately, there has to be somebody there to legally pronounce them dead. So we encourage you to call 911. Usually what will happen is a police or paramedic or both will show up at the scene. Don't be alarmed if the police show up at the scene, because that is just protocol. That is something that has to be done. Mm-hmm. And they do that to make sure that there is nothing. There is no foul play. There is nothing that somebody could hide, or it is what it's supposed to be, that it is. So that's what we encourage you to do, is to call 911, and then the police and the paramedics will show up. If there's no trauma, no foul play, nothing of that nature, it's an obvious natural death, then the paramedic or the police department will contact that decedent's, whether it be their specialist, their oncologist, their primary care physician, and see if they'd be willing to sign that death certificate.
Okay, and so what is the coroner's office role in home or even nursing home, hospital, or hospice deaths?
Well, we're contacted because legally decedent's physician, a regular physician of any kind, whether it be in a hospital, whether it be in a private practice session, they can only sign natural deaths. The coroner's office handles all of their deaths. There's 5 manners of death. There's accident, homicide, suicide, natural, and undetermined. Okay? Decedent's physicians can only sign natural deaths. If it's anything other than a natural death, it has to be, the coroner's office has to be notified, and we sign those death certificates. So that is our role. And what happens is the police or the paramedics, they'll call us if, let's say, the decedent has had a fracture, or let's say they've had some kind of traumatic event or anything like that. They will call our office and run the scenario past us and let us know what's happening. We will deem, or even sometimes we'll wait and review further medical records to determine if it needs to be a coroner's case or not.
I see. And you, of course, deal with next of kin, I'm sure, a lot. Mm-hmm. So who is considered next of kin?
Well, in the state of Indiana, the number one next of kin would be the spouse, but it has to be legally married. We don't recognize common law in the state of Indiana.
Okay.
So whether it be, male, female, male, it's the spouse. That is your number one. If they are not married, then it's going to go to the adult children. But it has to be a child that is over the age of 18. It cannot be if they have an 11-year-old, even a 16, 17-year-old cannot be a legal next of kin. It has to be an adult child over the age of 18.
All right.
Okay, and it can't be a stepchild or anything like that. It has to be a biological child or an adopted child. If you've been adopted by that family, then you are legal next of kin.
Okay, and with that, what rights does a next of kin have for after-death arrangements? After-death
arrangements, well, it's going to be, unless the individual has pre-arrangements decided, then it's going to be the legal next of kin that we're going to contact and ask, you know, hey, do you have a funeral home choice that you'd like your loved one to go to? Because sometimes death at home, they may be a coroner's case where we're just signing the death certificate, but no autopsy needs to be performed, or we don't need any further investigation. And so we prefer that individual or our decedent to go directly where the family would like them to go to. And so we would ask them if they have a funeral home choice, because if they do not, then the decedent will go to our facility, to our morgue, until the family can decide of that.
Okay, very good. I want to switch it over to Janelle for several questions here. What does an attorney do in this particular situation?
We don't have anything to do with the immediate death. We kind of jump on board and are contacted. Normally, some people do call us right away because they're nervous, they're panicked, they don't know what to do, they don't know when they need to call an attorney. But really, it's not until after the funeral, when they've had a moment to breathe and spend time grieving with their family, we are contacted to process the estate, meaning they have assets that they want to get to their loved ones either through a will, or if they don't have a will, it will pass through to the heirs under Indiana law. But the attorney is in charge of helping administrate that process, not the actual death process.
Okay, so does a power of attorney have anything to do with you after death?
No, and actually a lot of people are surprised by that. A power of attorney is something we refer to as a lifetime document. It is authorizing someone while you're living to be able to help you carry out tasks or financial decisions, that type of thing. But a financial power of attorney and a healthcare power of attorney, which is authorizing someone to help you make medical decisions, those are both while you're living. So the moment you pass away, those powers stop. There is a part in the healthcare power of attorney, not all of the documents have this in it, but I know we put them in ours, that has a provision for after death that allows someone to make funeral arrangements. So we make sure we have something like that in that for the exact reason Becky was talking about, that it's very difficult for the funeral home or the coroner's office to locate and find and name and figure out who is the next of kin. So having that legal document with that in there really helps kind of make the process go smoother.
Great. Now, if I were next of kin, would I be able to go in and start transferring the deceased assets myself?
No, not at all. And that's one of the reasons you do need to contact an attorney, because just like when you have a bank account during your life, no one else can have access to that account. The bank is not going to let your next of kin come in and take your money while you're living. Well, they're not going to let your next of kin come in and take the money after you pass either. Those assets, if they're in the decedent's sole name, are locked down. So that bank or that company, they need permission to be able to release it. That permission either comes through going through a probate estate or through another legal type document, but you need an attorney to help kind of shepherd you into being able to have access to those documents or to those assets.
Very interesting. Now, as a next of kin, how soon should I contact an attorney after the death?
Again, it's up to you. We have a lot of people who want to talk to an attorney right away, just to have explained what's going to happen next. But honestly, there are no deadlines. There's no urgency on our end, or there's no laws that say you need to contact your attorney immediately. So when someone does call our office right after someone has passed, we say, you know what, it's okay. You're okay. You're not gonna break any laws if you go take care of your loved one, take care of the family, have the funeral, and then after that, after things have calmed down, then contact your attorney. So there is no rush as far as when you need to call.
Now, when you say contact your attorney, now let me talk about the deceased. If they didn't have an attorney, would I need one?
You definitely want to talk to an attorney. It doesn't matter if it's your attorney, the decedent's attorney, a brand new attorney, but someone's going to need to kind of walk you through how the process works and how you can unlock some of those assets of the decedent. Say they own a home. You don't have the authority to sell that home until you have the permission from the court or from a small estate affidavit. You don't have the ability to go get the assets. You really are kind of locked out of everything until you talk to an attorney. It doesn't have to be any attorney specifically tied to someone.
Okay. So it's good to have that legal advice and help navigate you through the way.
Exactly, yes.
All right, and what information would I need to bring when I meet with the attorney?
Well, you want to bring, if you do have any of their legal documents, such as an original will or a trust, if they've done an estate plan and you have a copy with you, you definitely want to bring that with you. Maybe you're going to see the attorney who has all those legal documents anyway. You want to bring, usually the attorney will send out a questionnaire that says, well, how can we contact you, and who are the heirs, and what is their contact information? So you want to bring that completed with you. You want to bring your ID. If you're going to go through probate, we need to have a front and back of your ID. We need the death certificate, anything like that, any deeds for real estate, anything that has to do with their assets. You want to bring all of those things with you. You don't have to have all those things. People show up all the time not having those things, but the more you have with you, the further we can get as far as processing the estate.
That makes sense. Let's switch over to Becky here for a second and talking about information to provide. What should you have ready for the paramedics, the police, or even the coroner's office?
Well, the number one thing, especially if your loved one is a DNR or a do not resuscitate.
Okay.
We suggest that you have them placed randomly throughout the house in places where people are going to see them, such as a bedroom door, refrigerator, living room, where medics and police and everybody can see them right away. Okay. Also, we're going to need to know any medications that your loved one might have been on. Because on those medication bottles is usually going to have their family doctor or whoever's prescribing those medications. That makes it easier for us to contact, so we know who to contact and call, which are their, whether it's their cardiologist, whether it's their nephrologist, whether it's their primary care physician. Also, basically, if you have those funeral arrangements and or if let's say it's your roommate or somebody like that who's passed that you've been friends for years and you live together, or your sisters, and I think, who would be the legal next of kin, their contact information for us to be able to get a hold of them.
Now, earlier at the top of the show, we talked about the several different types of death. But what constitutes a coroner's case?
Anything that is not considered a natural death. A lot of people are surprised like what accidental deaths can be and what they are. A lot of people think an accident, it has to be a motor vehicle crash, or you have to have fallen, or fallen off a building, or something that dramatic. And it really doesn't even have to be that. It can be an elderly individual who falls and fractures a hip, and they just cannot get back to their normal. They start failing. They start declining in health rapidly afterwards. And we consider that an accidental death, and it's considered based on the cascade of events. Would that individual, even though they might have the diagnosis of hypertension or COPD or be on hospice situations, even with cancer, just because you're on a hospice situation doesn't necessarily mean that you're on death's door, that's what's going to happen. So they just can't get back to their baseline. They never become ambulatory again. They're never able to walk again or function the way that they used to do, and their health rapidly declines afterwards. Then we are notified, and that can be an accidental death, such as a drug overdose can be an accidental death, things of that nature. Obviously homicides, suicides are all coroner's deaths. But then we even sign some natural deaths, and sometimes we have people and individuals that they may have died of natural causes, but they haven't seen their primary care physician, or they haven't seen a doctor in 10 or 20 years. I don't know what they might have, and obviously there's no physician to contact. So those are the cases that we end up taking and doing autopsies and things of that nature, and try to do further research to find out more medical history on.
Okay. And earlier we talked about the power of attorney rights, and those end at the time of death.
Yes.
But Becky, who has the rights to the coroner's records?
Only the legal next of kin.
Okay.
The legal next of kin has those rights. And that's where we sometimes come into some issues, because families do not understand that. They're like, well, my brother died and I'd like this information. Well, if they're married, the spouse is considered the legal next of kin, and that's the only person that we can release the coroner's records to. There is one record that is releasable to anybody, and that is the coroner's verdict page. That is the only public record that the coroner's office releases.
Okay, all right. Well, we do have a text that just came in, and it's from Ted in Columbia City. We love our Columbia City folks. He says, I'm from Columbia City, and I'm interested in cases where assets already have designated beneficiaries. How is that impacted in Indiana? And will let's say, a brokerage automatically distribute according to that document?
Yeah.
Would you like to
I would love to answer that one. That's right in my area. So that was a great question, Ted. The beneficiaries actually are who get the asset. So we have a lot of times, well, is the will going to direct it? Is the beneficiary going to direct it? any asset that has a beneficiary on it, so whether it's a brokerage account or whether it's an IRA or a 401k or a life insurance policy, those assets are going to go to the beneficiary. So that beneficiary trumps what is said in the will.
Okay. Now, power of attorney, again, another question coming up. Even though their duties pretty much have ended at the time of death, is it still possible for a power of attorney to actually have to pay bills for the funeral or any other bills that might be lingering?
That's a great question. We get that one a lot because there's a lot of panic around how am I going to pay for the funeral?
Yeah.
Because the funeral bill has to be paid right away.
Yes, they want the money immediately.
Exactly, as they should. And the we talked about earlier, all the assets are locked down. So what do I do? And that's one of the things that we try to stress on the front end before someone passes. It's a great idea to have your funeral prepaid. Sometimes we have a life insurance policy that is directed to the funeral to pay for that. Sometimes if we don't have either of those, we put money aside in a bank account that we put a child on or someone who is responsible for paying the funeral assets. We make them a joint owner on that account.
Okay.
So when someone passes, it's still their account. It's not been frozen. So there are several ways to provide and make sure there's money for that. But in the event that your loved one has passed and didn't know or didn't have those plans in place, then typically it comes down to a family member is going to have to pay out of their pocket, and then they can seek reimbursement through the estate. But it's one of those things that we really would like to pre-plan for so that you don't find
Sure.
yourself in that situation.
Yeah, I was getting ready to ask you, how do I pay for the funeral if the bank accounts are locked? So you just pretty much answered that.
Yeah.
So who can make the funeral arrangements if the power of attorney no longer works? It's going to be next of kin, definitely.
It is. Sometimes we put in our documents, and sometimes the healthcare power of appointment or the advance directive will have language in there that survives death on purpose and said that my named individual has the authority to make my funeral arrangements. But in absence of having one of those, then it would fall to the next of kin.
Okay. We mentioned death certificates earlier, and I want to get into that with Becky here. What role does a death certificate play, and who signs off on those to make them valid?
Well, death certificate is very important, and what a lot of people do not realize is they get calls and they say, well, I need you to send, I need that death certificate right away because I need to do that to get into my bank account. Death certificates initiate at the funeral homes. So which is why it's important we ask family to either try to pre-plan or have pre-arrangements or know where they'd like to go. Sometimes families use a funeral home that they've used for years. It's in the family. They use the same funeral home.
Ours did
for over, for everybody.
Decades, yeah.
Exactly.
Generations.
Generations,
Yes.
exactly. And so we ask them, they don't realize, they think that all of a sudden we just produce this death certificate and it happens. No. That's why it's important to have a funeral home or be thinking about that, especially if your loved one is in that kind of situation. They've gone on hospice or they've done something, their health is really rapidly declining. We like to try to have you get things in order because that's where it initially starts at, is going to be a funeral home. And so your death certificate, even if you don't have a funeral home pre-arrangement, then they come to our morgue. Well, they will stay there until you decide on a funeral home choice. And so in that period of time, no death certificate is being issued until it initiates the funeral home. And if they're coroner's cases, we sign off on the death certificates. If it's a natural death at home where the coroner's office isn't involved, it's going to be either their primary care physician or their oncologist or their hospice doctor, or even the hospitalist in the hospital who's going to sign that death certificate.
And it seems to me more than likely if like their physician signs off on it, they're probably going to get that death certificate a little faster than if it has to be a coroner's case?
Not necessarily.
Okay, I thought maybe
Not
there's going to be...
necessarily,
All right.
because physicians have they have a set amount of time once they receive that death certificate, and it goes by at least 5 to 7 business days. So weekends don't count, things of that nature. And a lot of the times, like if you take a week, to decide on a funeral home, well, then you already have a week passed. And then we decide who's signing that death certificate. And then by the time the funeral home gets it and sends it, it's all electronic now. Back when I first started, it wasn't. It was
all U.S. mail.
It was all,
Snail
and I
mail.
had a typewriter. Okay, I used to do them by typewriter. So
Okay.
some of you younger people don't understand what a typewriter is. But yeah, and so it can be sometimes a week or two, and especially if that physician is on vacation.
I would assume a lot of families would like to get these DCs. I think
They'd
that's
like
what
to
they
get
call
them.
them,
And-
as quickly as possible.
And for us, if we do an autopsy, usually we don't get autopsy results. It can be anywhere from 6 weeks. It can go all the way up to 12 weeks sometimes, depending on the information and the extra testing and things like that we have to do for an autopsy. We can issue what's called a pending death certificate. And what that is proof of death. Okay, it'll just say pending investigation. It won't have a cause or a manner on it. But it works for, let's say, the Bureau of Motor Vehicles or the banks or Social Security. It will work for
Insurance
that.
claims.
It's some life, but life insurance claims, a lot of them sometimes will not accept it.
That's interesting. I
Because
like
they
that.
want to have that cause and manner of death on there.
Oh, for sure.
To make
Okay.
sure it's not a homicide of some kind where the beneficiary who might have been the perpetrator or an accidental death policy is different. If you have an accidental death policy, sometimes they pay differently than a natural.
True. I
That's
never
a
thought
great
of
point.
that.
I love that.
Well, we have another text coming in from Joe of North Manchester, and we'll take a look at your question. Can a person request no autopsy?
They can, but unfortunately, if it is deemed a coroner's case and we deem it necessary to do an autopsy, that isn't going to get overruled. If we deem it necessary to have an autopsy done, that autopsy is going to be performed.
Oh.
Now we have a lot of the times now with genealogy and everything, a lot of people would like autopsies, even though they're natural deaths at home, and they've got numerous amounts of medical history. And we'll tell them, we won't perform that autopsy because it does not meet our criteria to do an autopsy, but we are more than welcome to refer them and give them numbers so they can have a private autopsy done.
All right. I want to switch over to Janelle now. If there's a will, there's a way, the old saying. What if I can't find a will?
Yep. Well, we have every once in a while that happens. So a lot of times now we keep the original will, we, the law firm, and a lot of lawyers do that because if you have a will and we can't find an original, the court will only take an original. So we want to make sure we reserve that. If we only have a copy, we cannot find the original. There are some ways to work around that. But if no will can be found, it's as if you didn't have one. So it's important to make sure you keep that in a place where you can find it.
Okay, and so to divvy up all the property and the money and the property and so forth,
Sure.
who's responsible for getting that inheritance to the right people?
That would be the personal representative. It used to be called the executor, different name, same role. So when you exercise your right to have a will, you say where you want your assets to go and you say who do you want to carry out those wishes. That's the personal representative is the title of that, and they're the ones that are tasked with following all the terms of the will and getting the assets to the people that are listed in there.
So does a will avoid probate?
It doesn't. And that's another misconception. A lot of people think that it does.
Most wills will go through probate.
Well, in Indiana, the probate requirement right now is if there are more than $100,000 in assets in the decedent's name. So typically, if you're a homeowner, that's going to get you over that threshold right away. But it can also just be all of your bank accounts and your car and everything kind of added together. If you're over that $100,000, regardless of whether you have a will or not, we have to go through probate.
What if the deceased has debt and I am next of kin? Am I liable?
Oh, I get that question a lot too. That's
I bet you do.
another good one. And I like to calm people down. So the estate is liable to pay all the debt up to the amount of assets that are in that estate. So as a personal representative, you're liable if you distribute it out to the heirs and don't use it to pay the debt first. But that's different. You're not personally liable to pay the debt with your finances.
Good.
You're just required to use the decedent's assets to pay off all the debt before it can be distributed out. And sometimes, there's not enough to distribute anything out. The debt takes care of all of it. Or sometimes we have more debt than we have the ability to pay. And then there's a priority list of who gets paid first. As you can imagine, it's usually the IRS. So,
I would imagine.
They get their taxes.
Well, I think we have just enough time for one more text here, and it's from Richard of Huntington, and he is asking, what if I pass and I have no living relatives?
Well, I guess I can take
Yeah,
part
sure.
of that. On
Yeah.
our end, we do the best that we can to try to find a next of kin. Okay, if you have no living relatives, we'll go back as far as distant cousins and things of that nature to try to find a legal next of kin. If we don't, and we don't have anybody who's willing to step up, and you have no prearrangements or you have nothing organized in that form, then we'll put an ad in the paper. We'll do all of that to try to find, and even if it's a distant relative or anything like that, we will declare you an abandoned body, unfortunately, and we do have you cremated, and we keep your ashes or remains.
Okay. And I want to ask the last question to you. What are some of the steps to help prepare your family in the event of a possible future death?
Honestly, have open conversations. Please have open conversations. There's a lot of people who have the misnomer that if you talk about death, it makes it seem to happen sooner. To me, there's so many. When I started this career, I didn't know about death as much as I have. And the more that I deal with the public and go to homes and do things, no matter how much, even if you're on hospice, people still aren't prepared to have that conversation.
True.
Prepare as much as you can. Be open and honest with your family about your wants, your wishes. And if you don't have anybody, go and do some pre-arrangements for yourself. If you might have next of kin, if you don't like your next of kin or you don't get along with them, you don't want them to have anything to do with it, then go have those pre-arrangements done.
Communication is the key. Attorney Janelle Sprinkle and Senior Investigator, Deputy Coroner of Allen County, Becky Mays, thank you so much. It was a great show.
Thank
we
you.
appreciate your time. And we'll have you back again.
Yes.
And until next time, you can see our show on YouTube and also our website at pbsfortwayne.org. Thank you so much. We hope you embrace your life ahead. Good night.
The preceding program on PBS Fort Wayne is made possible in part by
Beers Mallers, elder law attorneys, providing information on legal matters of guardianship and financial issues relating to nursing home care. Beers Mallers attorneys can also assist with Medicaid requirements and help navigate difficult family situations. Beers Mallers, attorneys at law, with offices in Fort Wayne, LaGrange, and on the web at beersmallers.com.